Welcome to day 24 of the shift. Today we're going to talk about the drift. Now remember, a trigger sets off this whole cycle. The trigger leads us to the dark leads us to the drift. Now, this is the process that we're consciously going through. We're consciously taking control over. Because if not, we're going to end up back in that cul-de-sac, right? Going in circles, that level of insanity where we get triggered, we get angry, we start to blame someone or something else, then we feel shameful about it, then we feel guilty and ultimately right back out, right? So anger, blame, guilt, and shame, and we're constantly in that cycle. We're now taking the shift, a new tool, and learning how to leverage the trigger into the darkness, and now we are talking about something very specific called the drift. Now, what is the drift? The drift is exactly what it sounds like, right? You start drifting downward. You move from the darkness into the drift. Now, there's two ways that this is going to happen, right? Number one is you're going to free fall. It's like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. You're moving, man, and you are going straight down for one place, and that's the bottom. That's the earth. And impact, it's going to suck, right? And you've experienced this numerous times. So why do you keep jumping out of the airplane without a parachute? I don't know. We all keep doing it, right? But now you're learning how to do it, which is the other way. How do we jump out of the airplane with a parachute? Because what happens when we deploy a parachute? Boom, we immediately slow down. Not only do we slow down, but if we have the right kind of parachute, we can now start to steer. We start to control where it is that we're going and ultimately where it is that we land, right? So we go from a state of not being aware to being aware, right? And the cycle, again, anger, blame, guilt, shame, cycle, or we break it. Now, one of the things that we want to steer clear of, that we want to be careful of, is assumptions. Why? Because assumptions make an ass out of you and me. These are stories that we create inside of our head, right, that ultimately distract us. They keep us from discovering the truth. And that's not what we want. What we want is to answer the questions that we need to answer to get the results that we want to get. It could be anything from your wife refusing to have sex with you. And what do you say? Oh, well, she must not love me anymore. Or she must be seeing someone else. Or I must not be attractive anymore. Or. They're all stories. They're all assumptions, right? And so as we start to shift, this is where we start to take control in the drift of the direction and the location that it is that we're moving, right? We're taking control. We're not being controlled. Now think about this. During this drift, think about you being in a court of law. Now, as a police officer, I was in the court of law hundreds of times. And the only thing that matters in the court of law is not what he said, it's not what she said, but what do the facts prove? See, it didn't matter if it was homicide, if it was assault, if it was shoplifting. They all function the same. Prove to me their guilt on one side, prove to me their innocence on the other. And it all leverage about proving or disproving the facts, right? Men lie, women lie, the facts don't lie. So think about being in a court of law when you're answering these questions. You have to prove the story is true, right? So how is it that we control the drift? Again, through a series of questions. So continuing with our example from yesterday about the guy that cut me off on the way to the mall with my family. Let's look at the facts. What has you feeling this way? Well, the other day, I was driving with my family to the mall in our car. As we were merging to get into the lane to turn into the mall, I got cut off by a kid in a white BMW. Facts. Now, what is the story that you're telling yourself right now? This idiot should not be driving. In fact, he probably doesn't even have a driver's license. He should not be on the streets. He's a menace to society. That's the story that I'm telling myself right now. What negative actions does the story make you want to take? Well, any of a number of things. It makes me want to pit him, which is hit the corner of his vehicle and spin him out. Maybe he'll wreck. I don't know. It makes me want to call the cops on him. It makes me want to take matters into my own hands and beat the piss out of him. It makes me want to do any of a number of things. What evidence do you have to prove that your original story is absolutely true? Well, he cut me off. He must obviously be a bad driver. Literally, I'm in the lane, he cuts me off. No signal, no nothing, just cut me off. There's my evidence. Now, let's imagine for a moment that this story isn't true. What possibility do you see? Well, the possibility that I see is there could have been another reason why he cut me off. I don't know what it is. Maybe he was late for work. Maybe he was picking up his grandma. Maybe he was dropping off his girlfriend. But there could have been another reason, and I don't know what that is. In spite of how you feel right now, what do you ultimately want for this person's situation right now? I want this to never happen again. Not to me and not to anyone else. That's what I want. Now, what you can see is inside of these questions, things are starting to shift. They're starting to move. If you've noticed, the anger that I had before has dissipated. Sure, I'm still a little pissed off, but I'm not as angry as I was, right? Because I'm starting to look at things from a different angle, from a different lens. And now it's your turn. So we're going to take, your assignment is to take the form that you started yesterday and continue it. So yesterday we did the dark. Today we're talking about the drift. And so you're going to answer these questions inside of the drift. Now, when you're done answering these questions, what you're going to do is record a 2-minute video where you talk about your trigger and your story and ultimately what you want out of your situation. All right, you know what time it is. It's time to get after it. 3, 2, 1, off you go.